Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. My name is Julia Rothkopf, and I'm the Public Programs Associate at YIVO. And today we are all here for a very exciting conference, After Orthodoxy, Cultural Creativity, and the Break with Tradition. So thank you all for being here, and thank you also to our Zoom audience. We have a good amount of people on Zoom right now, and I'm sure throughout the day who will be joining us. So for those of you who do not know YIVO, we are a very special place for the celebration, contemplation, and exploration of Eastern European Jewish life and culture. We are located in New York City, where our library and archive contains over 24 million documents and 400,000 books. And these resources are used by people from all around the world. And we just have lots of programs and classes on Yiddish language and culture, exhibitions, and public programs where we aim to bridge the worlds of our vast archival and library collections and Jewish culture. So I would like to thank the University of Toronto, the Jewish Studies Center at Hunter College, Footsteps in Hillel, Israel for sponsoring today's conference, and also, of course, Zalman Newfield and Naomi Seidman for organizing. So thank you all for joining. And now I would like to hand the microphone over to Zalman and Naomi.
Good morning, everyone. Boker tov, guten Morgen. Indeed. It is wonderful to be here with all of you. There's many things that I learned from my Lubavitch upbringing, one of which is the concept of hakaras hatoiv, to recognize when someone has done something kind for you. And this event could not have taken place without tremendous kindness from many institutions and individuals. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge them and to give them a hearty yashikayach, a hearty thank you for all of their efforts and generosity. I should mention my name, Zalman Newfield. I'm a professor of sociology and Jewish studies at Hunter College, and the first person I'd like to thank is Professor Naomi Seidman, who really is the inspiration for this event. This is her brainchild. She had a vision to put together this event, and I'm so grateful to her that she brought me along for what turned out to be a very wild ride to try to organize this event. Thank you. Next, I'd like to thank the marvelous staff at YIVO, in particular, Alex Weiser and Julia Rothkopf. When we came to them over a year ago with the idea for this event, from the very beginning, they were extremely supportive, enthusiastic about it, and since that time, every single step along the way to putting together what has become quite a complex operation, they were extremely kind and generous, and we really could not have done this without you, so thank you so much. Thank you. I also want to thank the co-sponsors of this event, the University of Toronto, and also want to thank Hunter College, the Jewish Studies Center at Hunter College, and Professor Leah Garrett, the director of the center, who is also very enthusiastically supportive of this event and actually helped make the shidduch, helped make the match between the organizers and YIVO. I also want to thank the Footsteps organization, which is a New York-based organization that helps people that are leaving the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox community, and under the guidance of the director of Footsteps, Lani Santo, the organization does tremendous work to help those who are going through what is often a very painful process. And Footsteps also was very enthusiastic about co-sponsoring this event and helping with a lot of the logistics. Let's see. Also want to thank Hillel in Israel, which does similar, very vital work to Footsteps in New York. Hillel in Israel, thank you so much for being a co-sponsor. And lastly, I'd like to thank the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada for their critical funding to make this all possible. Thank you. And, okay, I said lastly, I misspoke. The last group of people I'd like to thank are you, all those in attendance, in person, and online. Thank you so much. I look very, very excited about today's event, and I really hope that this is a real learning experience for all of us. Thank you. Now I call Naomi.
Sorry, there's just one more person thanking everybody, which is me. So I just have to thank Zalman. I didn't really know him that well when I reached out, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something, and said, I have this crazy idea. Would you do it with me? And I had a very bad connection, and I was walking my dog, but I think you said yes. And it's been so much fun working with you and getting to know you, so thank you for that. And just a couple of other thoughts. One is that I'm so aware of how many more people could have been participating in this conference and festival later today. There's just such a wealth of talent and interesting stories and unique perspectives out there in the, it's very controversial what to call this group of people, but you'll excuse me if I use the word OTD for short. So, what? Off the derech? No, but then people yell at you, I'm on my own derech, I'm on a different derech, you know. It never ends. So, I'll just say it's been, I was looking back at my drafts of an idea for this conference/festival. It's been at least 10 years that I've been, drafting the ideas in my head, and finally, moved to Canada. This is another thing, is I helped organize this conference while living part of the time in Toronto and part of the time in Berkeley, California. So the people who are on the ground did a whole lot more work. So maybe it's been exactly 10 years. I feel like maybe I should say a Shechayanu or sing O Canada. I'm not sure, one of those two. But maybe we'll figure that out in the course of the day. So thank you all for coming. I'm looking forward to a really illuminating day. So this is the next session, and this session is going to be, Naftuli, you're on first. And are you introducing? Oh, I'm introducing people. So our first panel, and I don't know how many of you have looked at the program, but it's divided into kind of activism after Orthodoxy, religion after Orthodoxy, culture, scholarship after Orthodoxy, art after Orthodoxy. And the first panel is on activism, which I think is in some ways the most visible, controversial, maybe, aspect of what it is that people do. And we're starting off with maybe the most visible and controversial person of all, Naftuli Moster, because we're not afraid, right? So Naftuli Moster grew up in a large Hasidic family in Borough Park, Brooklyn, where I also grew up, and attended Hasidic yeshivas. He received a BA in psychology from the College of Staten Island, an MSW from Hunter College. In 2012, he founded YAFFED, is that how you pronounce it? I don't even know. Youth Advocates for Fair Education, to ensure that Haredi and Hasidic yeshivas in New York delivered a sound basic education to their students. After 10 years at YAFFED, he founded and is the publisher of Shtetl, which I think is what you're talking about today, right? A media outlet covering the Haredi communities of New York and beyond. Please join me in welcoming Naftuli Moster.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And again, thank you to the organizers, Naomi and Zalman, for organizing it and for including me in this important conversation. So my name is Naftuli Moster, and many of you know me as the founder and executive director of YAFFED, or a longtime executive director of YAFFED. But some of you, at least, who follow me more closely know that about 2 years ago, I left YAFFED to start Shtetl, a news outlet that's dedicated to covering the Haredi community. So one of the main functions of a news outlet, of the press, is to hold powerful people accountable. So I want to give you guys a very quick quiz, a pop quiz, on that topic. So, which leader, talking about holding powerful accountable, which leader has the most power over the day-to-day lives of the Haredi community? So for those who don't know, we obviously have President Biden, Governor Hochul, Senator Chuck Schumer, and Mayor Eric Adams. So you guys could shout out some ideas. Any others? You'll just shout a bunch of names. That's great. Okay, I'm not going to give away the answer right now, but we will get to it in a little bit. And now, I know it's very early in the day and very early in the conference to start talking Trump, but many of you, especially those who are like over 30 perhaps, may recognize these images. It goes back quite a few years when President Obama was president. It's during the White House Correspondents Association dinner, which is actually a dinner for journalists. And Obama was president, Donald Trump was just in the audience, and Obama skewered, shredded, or humiliated Donald Trump, whichever term you prefer to use. And many commentators actually believe, and there's a documentary that mentions it too, that it was at that very moment, at that dinner, that Donald Trump decided, I'm going to run for president. Perhaps as a bit of a middle finger or as an FU to the person who who was holding that seat at the time and who was humiliating him. So not to compare myself to Donald Trump or the Haredi press to Obama, but it was during my time at YAFFED that I repeatedly encountered the shortcomings and the deficiencies in the Haredi media ecosystem, and I kept telling myself that that is a big hindrance to the ability to make progress, to bring change in the community, and highlighted to me how important it is to have a free and independent press. So just to give you an example, here we have Yeshiva World News, which is one of the most widely read Haredi news outlets, at least for those who have internet and can speak a little bit of English, not fancy English. And you can see this was an article just about a development in the battle to bring secular education to yeshivas, and this is how they describe to report on it. Professional, right? So it says, the Moster loses. Now, many of you don't realize, but it's a bit of a shtech, poke. The Moster is also meant to be like Moser, which is a snitch. Okay, loses, an upside down photo of me. You guys can see, I printed this photo last week. I took a screenshot of it last week. So this upside down photo is not a mistake. It was an editorial choice that they put in there and left it there for 4 years. So just to give you an idea, this passes for normal journalism in the Haredi community at this point. But this is just one of many examples. You know, it goes on and on. Up there you see, that's an article in Hamidia. It's another super widely read. It's a little more polished than Yeshiva World News, but they don't have any problem describing, editorializing about the motives of people who are choosing to advocate for secular education. So for instance, the way they described it, the push for new regulations is largely the result of lobbying efforts on the part of disgruntled former members who've been trying to foist their views on the Jewish community by using legal and so on and so forth. And they go on to dismantling over 100 years of chinuch. This is how they, in reporting neutrally, this is how they describe it. They can't help themselves. And what you'll also find is that the Haredi press takes their cues and often serves as a mouthpiece to the leadership of the community. You'll see, here's a JTA article, that's not Haredi, but they quote a Haredi leader, and he uses the same exact terminology, describing those activists who are fighting for better education as disgruntled students. And it's a common thing that you'll find. Here's some other great headlines. Yeshiva World News again. There she goes again. New York State Education Commissioner attacks yeshiva education. This is the State Education Department commissioner they're talking about. She's not attacking the yeshiva. It was just normal procedural things that she was implementing as required by law. Here's a wonderful headline by matzav.com. It's not super popular, but it's just another Haredi outlet. And it goes, Satmar responds to substantial equivalency to the fight about secular education. Not a single Satmar student murdered a human being. The message is supposed to be that meanwhile, all the public school kids are running around murdering people. Therefore, our education is clearly much better, right? Normal journalism happening here. Here you have an article, again, just a regular article talking about this topic. The reporter, his name is Eitan Kobrer. This is a group called YAFFED, whose singular goal is to permanently disable the Torah educational system, stripping parents and educators of the right, and so on and so forth. This is normal. There's no neutrality. There's no unbiased way for them to present this information, because this is what the leaders really want to push. Just a little tidbit about this reporter, Eitan Kobrer. Very early in my journey at YAFFED, I actually reached out to him and many other new Haredi reporters, and I said, hey, I'm doing this work. I would love for you to interview me and report on it in your paper. He goes, okay, great. I'm going to start the interview. First question, how many dogs are on YAFFED's board of directors? Just a normal journalist in the Haredi world. So just to give you a little bit of idea of what a free press should look like versus what it looks like in the Haredi world, a real free press should inform the public about matters that are of importance to them. They should report fully without censorship or sanitization. They should hold leaders and powerful people accountable. They should be transparent about their sources, and they should name the journalists, because a big part is so that you can then follow the thread and figure out where the information is coming from. In the Haredi media ecosystem, they withhold important information that doesn't suit their narrative. They censor content. They censor, of course, pictures of women. They're beholden to the leaders and the powerful people in the community rather than them holding them accountable. They're often vague about their sources, or they don't name them. And of course, if you read Haredi media, you will see oftentimes, or most of the times, the articles just don't have a name. And if they do, oftentimes it's a pen name. So one thing I want to add is that in an ideal world, it would be the mainstream media that would sort of step into the plate, step in to fill the gap. And occasionally you'll find, the Forward or JTA or even the New York Times doing a story about the Haredi community. But that happens very rarely. Given the size and the influence of the Haredi community, there should be a steady reporting on the community. And they're not able to do so for multiple reasons. First one is they're not familiar with Judaism, with Haredi traditions, Hasidic customs. They don't have Yiddish proficiency. Oftentimes, the beginning of a story starts with something that's in Yiddish. We reported about the Satmar rabbi giving a speech in Yiddish where he spoke derogatorily about black people multiple times, in front of 5,000 people, by the way. So again, mainstream media doesn't have this kind of knowledge. They don't understand the differences or similarities between Hasidic sects and their leaders. They don't have a willingness to hold the Haredi leaders accountable. And for many of them, they're afraid of anti-Semitism. They're either afraid of being accused of being anti-Semitic or accused of causing anti-Semitism. And I know firsthand that this has silenced many reporters from basically doing their job. Shtetl is not afraid of these things. I mean, we're very mindful of anti-Semitism, but we also understand the superseding need to have a free press, and of course, to do so responsibly. And of course, we bring the knowledge, the inside familiarity and knowledge of the community, Yiddish proficiency, and so forth. So here are a few of Shtetl's sort of guiding principles. Obviously, the first one is that the Haredi community, like every community in the world, deserves a free press. As much as their leaders wouldn't like that, the people deserve it. Number two, we believe that in the Haredi community, in the Haredi context, holding powerful people accountable means holding the Haredi leaders and their gatekeepers accountable. Number three, that the broader Jewish community, that includes many of you in the room, have a legitimate interest, not just a voyeuristic interest, into what's happening in the Haredi community, and you deserve and need a window into it. And finally, and very important for this conference, is that the term Haredi applies to the whole spectrum of Haredim, and that includes those who no longer observe or outwardly appear Haredi. And I want to zoom into this a little bit because, again, during my time at YAFFED, I repeatedly encountered claims of, you left the community. Who are you to tell us what to do? You left the community. You just want to destroy us. You left the community. You're an outsider. You're an outsider. You're an outsider. You're OTD. And it occurred to me that who benefits from assigning this label to people who outwardly don't look Haredi or even don't actually observe the Haredi lifestyle? It's the Haredi leadership and the status quo that benefits from it. But in reality, why should it be that way? If you think about it, what does being Haredi or even Hasidic mean? You could say that it's like following the letter of the law and observing everything. But in that case, I could find you a bunch of Haredim who, like the guy who's serving prison time for molesting children, no one has ever told him that he's OTD or that he's an outsider. In fact, the Satmar rabbi goes and visits that guy in prison and treats him like royalty. So what takes away the Haredi term from those who decide to not observe or to not appear Haredi? If you think about it, they grew up Haredi, they have Haredi family, they got a Haredi education, and they have the scars to show for it. They ate Haredi food, they played Haredi music, they davened the Haredi nusach. Everything was Haredi, but now you are challenging the system. You're an outsider, you're OTD. And so I don't accept that anymore. And same thing with Shtetl, that I believe that it should be people like us who have a certain level of independence that can report accurately on the community, and it shouldn't be considered as though, oh, it's just outsiders. They want to destroy the system. So that's another important one. In terms of our audience, Haredim is obviously, we would like for that to be one of our audiences. OTD, which again, I just established, I don't actually consider them OTD, they're also Haredim. Haredi neighbors, or rather neighbors of Haredim, which is, in many instances, you have people living surrounding Haredi communities, like in East Ramapo and other places, where they have to interact or deal or encounter the Haredi system, but they know nothing about them. So Shtetl could be that window for them. Policymakers often can come to Shtetl to get information they wouldn't get from others. Candidates for office, elected officials, judges. I think this is very important in the case of divorce and custody battles, researchers, journalists, and Jewish philanthropists, as they think about what are important causes or important people to interact with in the Haredi community. Shtetl provides that window. I also think, especially since we're here at YIVO, there are some long-term benefits for Shtetl. I think in many years from now, archivists would sort of try to understand the Haredi community in 2024. And there's so much content coming out of the Haredi community, but so much of it is in Yiddish. It's on a leaflet that's never going to be seen by anyone ever again. So part of what Shtetl is doing is essentially digitizing it, translating it, and making it available, hopefully forever. And of course, with AI and ChatGPT, fledgling at this moment, it's important to feed neutral, accurate information so that for years to come, they will have that to pull from. So quickly getting back to the quiz. I think now some of you may have the answer. Which leader, and now you can see I phrased the question very cleverly. Which leader has the most power over the day-to-day lives of Haredim in New York? I didn't say which of these leaders, because the answer is none of the above. They don't. They can make any policies they want. They can do anything they want. It is these leaders, the Hasidic leaders who have, and other Haredi leaders who have the strongest grip and power over the day-to-day lives of Haredim in New York. And they should be treated as such, because they could say to the community, jump, and the community will jump. And as we speak, the community is jumping. People are making decisions based on these leaders, decisions about their income, decisions about who to marry, health decisions, even about taking surgery. and of course about the future of their children and their ability to earn a livelihood. So this is what we consider power in the Haredi context. So I just want to finish off, especially to those in the audience who come from the Haredi community, that you too can be a journalist. I know we didn't get an education and there isn't a strong culture of journalism in the Haredi world. And chances are you don't have a master's in journalism or any experience, but I encourage you to consider still being a journalist. Yes, there are people who have master's degrees and so forth, but they know nothing about the Haredi community. And it'll take them decades to learn it as much as you already know it just by being born and raised there. So we can help on the journalism part. I encourage you, approach me or email me at nmoster@shtetl.org. Thank you.
Person who's flown the furthest to be here is Yair Haas. Let me get to your Yair Haas. Yair was raised in an ultra-Orthodox Jerusalem family and later embraced a secular lifestyle. He studied social work and economics at Hebrew University, worked as a teacher and project coordinator for at-risk youth. He began volunteering with Hillel Beyond Orthodoxy, which is the Israeli, maybe it's not quite the same thing as Footsteps, I'm not 100% sure. He started in 2007, and he served as the CEO for the past 10 years. So join me in welcoming Yair to the stage.
Thank you very much. 1 minute. I'm not sure I can see from here. Thank you all for coming and for watching at home. I will read. I will try to look at you at the same time. I'm not promised I will succeed. In Israel, living religion is influenced by social, cultural, and political aspects. These aspects shape the experience of Yotzim, sometimes creating obstacles, and in other cases providing a sense of structure or belonging for those who left religion. One of the key distinctions between living religion in Israel and abroad is the difference between passive and active Jewish identity. In Israel, Jewish identity is the default. Even if you do nothing to actively maintain it, it is embedded in everyday life, from national holidays to official state documents where the Hebrew date is always included by law. Speaking Hebrew itself is part of your Jewish identity. Meanwhile, outside of Israel, preserving Jewish identity requires an active choice, with Yotzim needed to define themselves, how Judaism fits to their life and what place it has its play in their daily experience. However, despite the passive nature of Jewish identity in Israel, Yotzim still face a significant immediate decision that requires them to make an active choice that deeply impact their identity. I will come to that in a moment, but first, brief introduction. Although the state of Israel was established mainly by secular movements, many forces within Israel attempt to unite religion with national Jewish identity. This creates tension for Yotzim, who often faced questions about their legitimacy as Jews and Israelis. One common question they faced is, if you don't believe in God, what gives you the right to this land? Like many other questions, when you don't believe in God, or if you don't part of the ultra-Orthodox community, the answer becomes more complicated. Another expression of this tension can be found in the ironic remark that secular Zionism is the belief that God does not exist, but he promised you the land anyway. For someone who came from a world where everything is black and white, and Judaism is only a religion, it takes time to develop a new worldview. However, Yotzim in Israel do not have much time to reflect. Despite the mandatory military service in Israel, the political reality currently allows most Yotzim to choose whether or not to serve. This is a critical decision that cannot be delayed, and every choice will have consequences for their sense of belonging in the future. Non-Israeli Yotzim living abroad have perhaps more time to flexibility to making a critical choices of identity after they leave. Another important difference affecting Yotzim in Israel is the growing tension between religious and secular communities. I will mention three key aspects. First, the religion parties in Israel not only aim to maintain the current extreme religious compulsion, but also strive to expand it. This intensifies the anger of the secular public toward the religion community. As the power of religion parties grows, so does the level of anger. Second, the Haredi leaders determined to preserve the exemption from military service for young Haredi men, even if they're not studying in the yeshiva. This topic has escalated the tension between Haredim and even national religious group in Israel to new heights. The only factor currently balancing this tension is the fact that we are in the middle of the war, and many believe that once this is over, this issue will reshape the division of political blocs in Israel. Another significant issue is the core curriculum education and integration into Israeli workforce. Here, it's important to note a fundamental difference in how this issue addressed abroad compared to Israel. While around the world, the education of Haredi children is primarily an issue of individual rights. In Israel, the education of Haredi community is a strategic issue that affects entire Israeli economy. As the Haredi community become a larger part of Israeli society, the lack of education threatens Israeli economy and ultimately the future existence of Israel. Therefore, many secular parties and philanthropy have made integrating Haredi community into workforce a top priority. They launch educational and employment program. They have received hundreds of millions of shekels in funding. These programs quickly become a tool of religious coercion. Do you want a fully fund for higher education up to master's degree? You can get it only if you remain a Haredi, at least outwardly. Secular parties and philanthropy are so eager to succeed in integrating Haredim into the workforce that they go great length to prove that the rabbi that those who participate in this program will remain Haredi. However, the reality is different. And many of those who join these programs are often young people who are already on their way out. This creates a situation where both the rabbi and the secular initiators have shared interest, hiding those who left the Haredi community and accepting those they think will stay Haredi. Those who leave threaten the claim that this program do not endanger the spiritual level of young participants. Spiritual level, of course, means obedience. But this is not the only reason why philanthropy and the government prefer not to see Yotzim in this program. For them, it is an investment intended to solve the problem of integrating Haredim into workforce. When they look at Yotzim, they think problem solved. At the same time, alongside this program, Haredi politicians ensure the flow of massive budget aimed keeping the Avrechim in the college and the young Haredim in the yeshiva. For example, the Ministry of Welfare funds program for at-risk Haredi youth. The rabbis of this program explicitly state that the low enlistment rate of their graduate are their main measure of success. 10 years ago, Hillel approached the government with a simple demand. The Ministry of Welfare, which is responsible for all young people, must also care for Yotzim. It is clear that we don't have the same power that the Haredi politicians do, but it happened. Every year, the state invests more and more resources in supporting those who live in the Haredi community. Since then, hundreds of Yotzim who were thrown out of their homes have received a comprehensive housing solution from the State of Israel, including consulting and support when planning their path forward. This service provided to them by Hillel free of charge and fully funded by the government for up to a year and a half. Another path of activism was led by Yotzim through the Yotzim Leshinui organization. They stated that any program that's designed to help Haredim integrate must also open to Yotzim, have parallel program for them. When we address the issue of caring for Haredi children, we encounter different approach among Yotzim. Some support the Haredi community rights to autonomy and demand only the assistance for those who choose to live. Others, however, having experienced the difficulty in closing the educational gap, believe in the necessary to push the government to insist on core curriculum studies for Haredi children. It is very important to note that there is several Yotzim in Israel, in collaboration with concerned Haredim, are working to expose cases of abuse and sexual assault. Anyone who grew up in the Haredi community knows that this is just the tip of the iceberg. And the Haredi society does not make significant, if the Haredi society does not make a significant change, this widespread phenomena will be will not disappear at its own. Hillel and Yotzim Leshinui have jointly established a program that advises married Haredim who wants to live and divorce how to navigate the legal system in religious court in Israel. The central dilemma activist efforts is where a central dilemma of activist efforts is where to position oneself in the spectrum between changing Haredi society and focusing solely on those who have left it. In Israel, organizations that supported by the government or seek to influence the government, which most of the time has significant power held by Haredi politicians, must also consider how their choice will affect the government's willingness to cooperate with them. Anyone involved in activism in the coming years will need to find their place somewhere along this spectrum. Thank you very much to the initiators of this day, of this conference. Thank you for coming, and thank all the Yotzim that helped this happen.
Thank you so much, Yair. And the next speaker is going to be Beatrice Weber. And it's a real honor to introduce Beatrice, who's the subject, I think also the writer of countless articles, interviews, news programs, locally, nationally, globally. Beatrice is a senior advisor at YAFFED, now I know how to pronounce it, the nonprofit that we heard a little bit about, that advocates for education justice in the Hasidic and Haredi community. She's a mother of 10 and a grandmother of 12. And escaped her arranged marriage only a few years ago, leaving the Hasidic life in the process. Deprived of a basic education as a child, she enrolled in college as an adult, earning a BA and an MBA. And she's trained as an interfaith minister and is now a public speaker and activist and is writing a memoir, which I know we're all interested in reading. Thank you.
It is both an honor and a deeply personal moment to stand before this incredible group. Individuals who, like myself, have bravely stepped away from the Hasidic and Haredi communities. Each one of us has a unique story to tell, filled with struggle, resilience, and an unwavering pursuit of freedom. Today, I will share a little bit of my own journey with you and celebrate the collective power of our voices. My name is Beatrice Weber, and like many of you, I was born into a world where my life was scripted by others. Every decision, whether about my education, career, or relationships, was made by others. Even completing high school was not considered a priority. At 18, I was married off to a future rabbi and scholar, and by the age of 39, I was a mother of 10 children. While many people looked at my life in Monsey, raising children and supporting my then husband, a Rosh Kollel, as a success, I felt suffocated. There was no room for me as an individual, and I could no longer accept living a life that left no space for my own identity or aspirations. One of the first steps I took towards gaining control over my life was pursuing a college degree. Education became my lifeline, my path to independence, and the means by which I would eventually support myself when I made the difficult and courageous decision to leave. Leaving my marriage and the only community I had ever known was painful and filled with sacrifice. Like so many of you, I faced rejection from family and friends. I endured years of legal battle for custody of my children and struggled with the trauma of leaving everything that was familiar to me. I know that many of you here can relate to these experiences. You know what it's like to have family members turn their backs on you, to have leaders you once looked up to manipulate and betray you, and have your own children vilify you. As a mother, there was no greater pain than having your children ostracize you. I can tell you that is a wound that never heals. So why do we do it? Why endure all this pain? Why choose to be an outspoken advocate and continue to be vilified by the community and our families? To me, the answer is simple. Because life is good. Nurturing oneself is good. Building a family and a community that supports and nourishes all its members is not just good, it's essential. Whatever you believe in, there is a profound fulfillment in working towards a future of goodness and equity, a future where every child is nourished in mind, body, and spirit, free from shame and repression. But we're not there yet. We have a lot of work to do, both individually and collective. And the work is not just good, it's necessary. Building a better community is the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. It is the foundation of a good family and a good neighborhood. I want a strong family. I want a supportive neighborhood for my family, and I have dedicated much of my adult life to this pursuit. Activism is a word that carries a lot of weight and sometimes a lot of baggage. Activists can be seen as annoying or disruptive. They stand in streets with clipboards, shouting slogans on the steps of City Hall and wear shirts with bold slogans declaring their cause. At times, it can feel like a lot. And in these polarized times, it can definitely feel overwhelming. But activism, especially in communities steeped in repression, is vital. It is the force that sparks change, the catalyst that wakes people up and helps them cast off their shackles. Activism is the awakening that allows someone to leave an abusive marriage, fight for an education, or find a job when everyone around them says it's impossible. For those of us coming from these repressive communities, activism is much more than politics or policy. Activism is about us. It's about finding ourselves. Growing up in environments where you're told that your views don't matter, that your thoughts are not valid, you learn to stuff yourself down. You learn to close yourself off. After leaving the community, every day that we live our lives according to our own beliefs is in itself an act of activism. Taking a stand for oneself is always the first step. Realizing that you matter, that your voice matters, is a profound realization and the beginning of a new path. For me, this was an epiphany. Acknowledging that I mattered without guilt shook me to my core. Activism takes that feeling of self-worth and applies it to the world around us. It is about caring for the world as much as we care for ourselves. For me, activism also includes acknowledging those who have been left behind. For some, the trauma of leaving these communities is so deep that they want nothing more to do with it. And that is totally understandable. Taking care of oneself comes first. For me, activism started with fighting for my children's future. I didn't want my younger children to grow up without an education. I had seen the impact it had on my older children and didn't want that for them. I fought to get my son a full education, and that is how I became involved with YAFFED. Some of you have read my essays or seen the news coverage about my son's yeshiva or the work I've done with YAFFED. I just want you to know that in an effort to find my own personal balance between activism and self-care, I've recently stepped down as the executive director, but remain deeply involved with YAFFED as a senior advisor. Today, my youngest son, an 11-year-old, is receiving an incredible education. The first of my 6 sons to read a novel and summarize it, solve an algebra equation, and learn the Talmud with a critical lens. I fought for that, and YAFFED helped. Without organizations like YAFFED, people like me would have nowhere to turn. YAFFED was founded by people from within our community and are driven by activists, people like us, who understand that change is necessary. I moved a mountain. I went from being a woman with no voice to earning an MBA and leading a nonprofit that has brought national attention to the issue of lack of education in Hasidic yeshivas. Our work has influenced public policy, protecting children's right to an education. We're still fighting and have a long way to go, but we have made strides, and these strides will help others on their journey. Every step forward helps someone else find their path, and when we walk together, we create systemic change. Let me tell you a little bit about YAFFED's work, which is so dear to my heart. Since 2012, when YAFFED was founded by our iconic leader, Naftuli Moster, we have used a multi-pronged approach to affect change. First of all, through advocacy work, we have built strong relationships with government officials and others to advocate for a sound basic education for tens of thousands of students in Hasidic and Haredi yeshivas across the state. Our advocacy continues to push education authorities to effectively enforce the law. Through our efforts, in 2022, we succeeded in getting the New York State Education Department to unanimously agree on new regulations for these schools, which are set to be implemented by the end of this school year. More recently, in the past New York State legislative session, we staved off 3 separate attempts by the Hasidic leadership and their proxy politician to introduce legislation that would water down and greatly delay the implementation of these regulations. YAFFED also works to actively raise awareness on this issue. We shine a light and try to combat misinformation from those who wish to preserve the status quo. Our efforts are crucial in curbing the spread of false information and helping people understand the severity of the issue and also the solutions that can be implemented. You can still remain Haredi and get an education. The front page article in the New York Times, published almost exactly 2 years ago, really helped others understand the extent and seriousness of this issue. YAFFED also harnesses the power of the courts to compel government action. With a dedicated attorney on staff, we continuously file legal actions and advance this critical issue. This will become even more important in 2025, when all schools will be legally required to comply with the law. We are the only organization that understands the community in this way and is working to ensure that the new regulations are implemented. We have every reason to believe that the institution will continue to deny the truth and deny our children an education, and it will be up to us as knowledgeable activists to step in. Lasting change is community-driven. While organizing within the Hasidic community poses great challenges, as people are terrified to speak up, we have successfully reached out to individuals through our Yiddish newsline and newsletter. Our work has penetrated the most insular of communities, and I'm constantly surprised by who reaches out to us, despite their fears, wanting to tell us, wanting to help us. Our goal is to amplify those voices of discontent and ultimately drive change. We're also working to get more of your voices heard, so please look out for upcoming events. Finally, we have made significant progress in helping mainstream large Jewish and educational organizations understand this issue and have garnered some support. We continue to engage with these organizations and build support. Together, these efforts bring us closer to our goal of ensuring that every Hasidic child receives the education they deserve. The theme of this panel is Activism after Orthodoxy. And I encourage each of you to reflect on your life, your path, and the issues that matter to you. We may have left the community, or have not, but we carry with us a deep understanding of it. That knowledge is power and necessary for change. There is much work still to be done. We need to continue ensuring that the regulations be enforced by 2025. We know the schools are not prepared, and as government agencies often are, the New York State Education Department is woefully understaffed, but we cannot let up work on our issue. The case is also being heard in the highest court of the state as the community leaders continue to take legal action to try to prevent education to their children. But we've come so far and we'll continue our fight. And there are some ways you can help. You can engage with us, attend our meetings, you can share your story. Your experiences inspire others to advocate for change and often does reach individuals in the community and inspire them to start conversations. Contact your political representatives. Let them know you support this. And finally, support our legal efforts and contribute to our legal initiatives to hold these schools accountable. To our allies in the room, thank you. Your support amplifies our message and gives legitimacy to our cause. You are invaluable partners, and your expertise and support will continue to help us navigate the complexities ahead. And to all of you here today, thank you for your courage and commitment. Let us honor the struggles we faced by ensuring our children's futures are brighter, where they can learn, grow, and thrive. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can rewrite the narrative for future generations.
Oops, what happens? There we go. Hi, Elad Nehorai, who's here. Elad Nehorai is a progressive thinker, writer, and activist. Learning from his time in the Hasidic community and studying extremism, he's become an outspoken pro-democracy voice. Since October 7th, he's drawn on his Israeli background to inform his work building coalitions among those who share a vision of solidarity for the future. He's a well-known writer specializing in extremism, anti-Semitism, marketing, and how the three intersect. He's an ex-Hasidic Jew who, before leaving Orthodoxy, led a creative Jewish community in Brooklyn called Chevriya, as well as the largest politically progressive Orthodox Jewish advocacy group called Torah Trumps Hate. Today, he runs a marketing agency for good called Justice Marketing. You can find Elad's writing on MSNBC, The Daily Beast, HuffPost, The Forward, Haaretz, and beyond. Welcome, Elad.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to Naomi and to all the organizers. This is special. I think it's really amazing to have, a group of people that have largely felt alone throughout history, have felt isolated, kind of come together and talk about the real issues that surround us and allow us to go a little bit deeper, I think, in our experiences. I think it's interesting when we talk about ex-Orthodoxy, when we talk about Orthodoxy, when we talk about leaving, I think and we talk about the freedom that we're aiming for after we leave, I think it's really important that we understand within that the framework of what we're leaving and what's going on behind it, because the words freedom, for example, leaving this community, what does it actually mean? And how do we know when we're actually free? Because I think it's one thing to understand to leave the community as a physical act, but how do we get the mindset that we're trying to leave behind also to leave us? It's one thing to leave physically. It's another thing to leave psychologically. And it's another thing to also help the world around us leave the mindset that we've bought into. Because I think, when I first left, I left Chabad about 5 years ago. I was a Baal Tshuva. I'd been part of it for 15 years. And I was very confused when I left. I didn't understand what I'd even joined, why I had joined, and what had drawn me to it. And so I spent a lot of time then trying to understand the dynamics behind it. And what I found, the more I learned about this, the more I examined my own experience, the more I started to understand and believe that the things we're leaving behind in Orthodoxy when we leave are things that many people have to leave, and that our society is actually trying to leave as a whole. And I think that really matters because I think we are really part of an arc of history in which humanity has turned authoritarian at a certain point and then has worked really hard to leave it over time. And that's the word I really want us to focus on today is authoritarian and authoritarianism. That's the word that I tend to use now when I talk about what I left behind. Now, the reason I use that word is because there's a sociologist named Philip Slater that I've learned to really absorb recently. And Philip Slater had a very broad view of authoritarianism. I think a lot of times when we hear the word authoritarianism, we think of politics. Maybe in our case, we think specifically of the religion we left. But his view of authoritarianism was really broad. His argument was that authoritarianism started 6,000 years ago, and that we are still within what he would call an authoritarian megaculture. In other words, around the time agriculture started to develop, and as we started to centralize in our communities, and as villages turned into cities, what started to happen was a transition from a hunter-gatherer society where it was largely egalitarian. People had different roles, but there wasn't exactly the hierarchy that we're used to today. In fact, what he argued, what also other historians have argued since then, is that this transition led to a number of very interesting developments. And what I find really fascinating when you think about it like this is that there's actually, when you look at the arc of human history, this change, this argument of change happened 6,000 years ago, but humanity and the hunter-gatherer societies that we had lived in all together throughout our history was actually 300,000 years. So what that means is this is actually a small slice of the time that we've been around. And I think that really matters, because I think a lot of times we tend to think the society we live in, the world we live in, is the default. And we're largely managing what we can. I think it also happens to a lot of us who leave. We tend to think, we found freedom, end of story. And I actually think, what I've found is that I'm surprised very often at how much some of the stuff I've left behind is still around me in varying ways. So Philip Slater's definition of authoritarianism is very broad. He says it's a highly centralized social organization developed in order to exercise coercive control over unwilling participants in the community. Now, I find that definition to be fascinating because I think it applies very much to Orthodoxy, right? We have coercive control that is really controlling so many parts of our lives, in which many of us feel coerced into, meaning we're unwilling to be coerced, but we're still being coerced in that respect. So a really good example would be a woman who wants to get a get, wants to get divorced, and essentially she's an unwilling member of society that has to give in to the laws around her. And the way that works is by having this highly centralized social organization. What that really means is essentially a hierarchy. There's people at the top, and that by definition they have power, just by virtue of the fact that they're at the top. And people at the bottom, there's a hierarchy in which you're involved. And that is actually something that is very broadly applied. We could argue that because, especially as the United States has had centralized power grow and grow in the executive branch, well before Donald Trump, right? Obama had to make a bunch of executive decisions. He started to centralize more of his executive choices around when he was president. And this has been an arc that's really happened since Reagan. And so what that means is if we look at this from that perspective, what that really means is that this also applies to, for example, the economy, to the fact that even someone working, for example, in a corporation is being coerced in some sense. If they don't want to do things a certain way, especially in an unequal society where if they leave, they will starve or they will have trouble feeding their family. We're really living in a time where someone at the top can have a lot of power over people, and to the point where, again, they can control their lives in a way that is massively, massively coercive. So I think it's important that we break down what authoritarianism actually is, in a larger sense, and actually, define the different elements of it. So as we mentioned, there's the centralization of power, hierarchy, as I'm sure we're all used to in terms of what we've left behind. The suppression of dissent is a big part of it. It's very important that to keep the hierarchy established, that any dissent is quieted. I know big reason that I left my community, I left Chabad, was because as I started to speak up about things like abuse and racism, and these were things that I had assumed were kind of on a linear trajectory to improving. And in reality, that was something that was, the more you spoke up, the more you were punished. And it became clear to me at a certain point, I was running this publication called Hivriya, and we started publishing stories about abuse. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of backlash that happened at that time. There was efforts to shut us down. We started this other publication called Neshamas that was anonymous articles that often were almost always from first-person perspective about abuse and actually the quieting of their experience. And that reaction that I saw to trying to shut that down was really a fascinating thing, because I also saw the way in which abuse victims were themselves shut down. This is something that YAFFED fights back against as well. This attempt, there's a lot of people that want this broader education or are aware that if they don't get this broader education, they'll be in trouble as they have to grow up and have to go into the world. And so all of that control, you can see the reaction to YAFFED, right? There's this massive reaction. YAFFED is considered, or was considered, really taboo for so long. Any association with YAFFED could completely cut you out of respectable circles in Haredi communities. There's also the control of information as well. The ways in which, the obvious one, of course, is the way the internet can get shut down, the way people can cut themselves off from communities. But of course, there's really a lot that gets involved with that. Just simply, for example, the argument that we should mainly spend our free time studying Torah instead of studying secular subjects it's a form of kind of voluntary control of information, or seeming voluntary control. And then you have the idealizing leaders. We have the messianic view of leaders. All of this really convinces us that it is our job, the followers, convinces them it's their job to subsume their autonomy, to give up their autonomy to something above them. You have to have an enemy, some sort of enemy, or an outside or an other. Whether you're an Orthodox community that sees the non-Jewish world as dangerous and something to be avoided, whether you look, for example, the reason I strongly believe that's a big reason that racism exists in these communities, because you need something to be against. And especially, I would argue, this is a big reason ex-Orthodox Jews are targeted. Because they're actually, I think many of them, in a sense, depend on ex-Orthodox Jews in order to maintain their legitimacy. To argue, essentially, look, they create a mythology around ex-Orthodox Jews and what they're doing to their community, how it's shutting down their community, how it's so dangerous, look at the way they're hurting us. That creates a counter-narrative in which Orthodoxy is this heroic subject that's fighting against this evil enemy. And that, really, authoritarianism relies on enemies. So we're thinking about all these dynamics, and imagine how much that applies to so many things. I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine. She's an actress, and she was on a TV show. She had to leave it because it was a very abusive situation. And what I found so fascinating about talking to her was how much my story resonated with her and how much her story resonated with me. And if you think about, for example, how abuse is really endemic in Hollywood and how widespread it is, because there's a lot of the same structures that exist within Orthodoxy within Hollywood. So for example, the glorification of certain celebrities, glorification of creators, auteurs, becomes an excuse for them to abuse others. And in addition to that, there's often a cultish surrounding society around that, or seeming society around that. What happens is there's a cult followers essentially of these leaders. There's a quieting of dissent. She essentially, this friend of mine, the reason I can't give you any details about it is because she knows if she says something about it, if she becomes vocal about it, this might destroy her career. And as we know, there was a whole movement, and we know that Me Too really started because of what was happening in the media and happening in Hollywood. And these kind of parallels are important for us. And I think the reason they're important is because this is the way in which we're going to really, really leave Orthodoxy. But what I mean by that is leaving not all of Orthodoxy, understanding the parts of Orthodoxy that are authoritarian, that are the things we actually want to leave, the parts that caused us to subsume our autonomy, to subsume who we are, to give up the parts of us that make us human. That's essentially what authoritarianism is. It's a belief system in which the individual is not important. The people at the top are important, the structure is important, but if you go against the structure, if you go against the leadership, then your value is gone. I remember I met, one of the first times I had another interaction with a shliach of Chabad, I was at an event in which I actually mentioned a Hasidic idea that I found really powerful. And afterwards he offered to study Tanya with me. And I said, no, thank you. And he asked, he kind of pushed me a little bit, and I still turned him down. And he said, well, at least you shared that idea. And it was really interesting. It was like a subtle thing. But to me, I found it really interesting because essentially what he was saying was the value that I brought had nothing to do with my views, my idea, my identity. It had to do with the fact that I shared a little bit of Hasidus. And I think that really matters because that exists all around us. Really, if in so much of society, our autonomy is meant to be given up, for larger causes. And it doesn't mean that we can't care about causes, but it does mean that part of caring about bigger things is remembering that they're based in the inner value that every human has. And I think that's the way we're going to get to a better place, when we value not just the humanity in ourselves, but the humanity of the people around us. When we start to see the humanity in the people that we maybe have once considered enemies, the people that our society tells us to look down on, our society tells us that we shouldn't be in partnership with. And since I've left, I'll give you one last example. I've made a few friends in LA after I moved there. And a lot of what we have in common is leaving authoritarianism or learning about authoritarianism. And one of my good friends is a Muslim woman who covers authoritarianism as a war correspondent. She's been in Syria and all these things, and covering many, many dangerous authoritarian regimes. And she really resonates with a lot of my story. And she came from LA just to see this. She's over there, I think, videoing me. It's because we share, these deeper values of, openness, democracy, of, the autonomy of the individual. This is the work that we do together. This is the work I do with other racial justice fighters, and really anyone that values humanity in that respect. So I really encourage you all not just to imagine how you leave this authoritarian construct, but how we bring the world into a less authoritarian place. Thank you.
We still have plenty of time for Q&A, and I'm just going to ask Elad, where are you going? I order you. No. So we have, if all the speakers can come up to the stage, and we'll give you mics, and we would love to hear what you in the audience think about. Is somebody also monitoring the chat? Or that's, yeah. So we also have people on Zoom. Hello out there. And if you want to ask a question or complain or rant or questions. We're only taking questions. Actual questions. Brief questions. I don't know why I'm here. I'm just like at Zalman's mouthpiece. So first, let's all just thank our panel again. And I saw a hand in the third row. Oh, there's a mic coming around the auditorium.
I'm very, very impressed with this panel. I grew up Orthodox. However, my maternal grandparents were Shtetl Jews. They were the only Jewish family in a small shtetl. What distinguished them was not only the fact that they were Jewish, but they were enormously wealthy. They were murdered. I'm the child of Holocaust survivors, which is another cross to bear for the children of survivors. However, what I wanted to ask is, do you see any comparisons or differences between the Shtetl Jews in Eastern Europe, who were very insular, very tight, who had to stick together because of pogroms, because of all sorts of issues and violence against them, when they crossed the Atlantic and came to this Gan Eden, did they become even more insular, in your opinion? Did they become even more authoritarian? I mean, we can take the Jewish community at large as a microcosm as a macrocosm, and then the community that is surrounding the family and the mishpucha is the microcosm. So do you think that things have gotten worse? And is there a reason for it? And would you say that authoritarianism is to blame because of the people at the top who can only keep their control over the members in the community by keeping them ignorant to some degree?
Thank you. So that's really seems like a historian's question. I don't know who's
I was going to say, part of the problem with us not getting an education is we didn't even learn our own education, our own history, so I really don't know. Even though we're just a few generations removed from the Shtetl, I really don't know much. But I could say that I highly doubt today's Shtetl is more insular than those Shtetls just because they live near, they live in New York City. There are trains.
It's a shtetl that's a website.
And I'll tell you, I lived around the corner from an F train growing up my entire life. But the first time I set foot on an F train, I was 20 years old. So I'd never ridden or whatever on the train until I was 20. So there is that very strong insularity despite being so close to, the city or in the city. But I still, personally, from my understanding, I wouldn't say it's as insular or worse.
So before I just ask you to pass the microphone to whoever, can I just see how many questions that we'll be fielding so that we can, divvy up the rest of the time? I see 3. Am I missing anyone? Oh, there's a few on Zoom. Okay, so just to keep in mind that there's people out there who want to say something. Keep it going? Yeah, okay. Should we move on to the next one? Okay, so that's okay?
I think maybe afterwards
yes,
we can answer many questions together.
So the person sitting behind the Harris t-shirt and the Kamala t-shirt, I see a pattern here. I don't see any MAGA hats. Maybe they're on Zoom.
This is a question for all the panelists. And what I'm seeing is a pattern of people who grew up Hasidic or Haredi and reacting against that. So you have a Newtonian action-reaction. And to me, it seems that no one is considering that there's something called modern Orthodoxy, where children are actually...
We've heard of it.
Yeah.
We know.
Synopsizing
Oh my God,
novels.
You say no one's considering it. I think people, OTD people or people exiters, let's call them, Yotzim, in this room are laughing because that's a regular question that's asked.
So I ask it.
Which is fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's a fascinating, brilliant, wonderful question.
Thank you.
But it is familiar. Yeah. Anyone want to go with the modern Orthodox? Can I just say, my joke is always, I can't afford to be modern Orthodoxy. Orthodox, it's too expensive.
I just want to say the beauty of exiting from a very coercive and repressive community is the ability to be able to make choices. Is modern Orthodoxy a choice? Have we all maybe thought about that? Absolutely. But it's a choice. So whatever life path one chooses afterwards is valid. And I think the idea that people who leave the community are reactive is just coming from a belief that's centered from the perspective of the community. In reality, I think that's wonderful. I am so happy that there are Orthodox kids doing that.
I'll share a little bit. As I was mentioned, I was a Baal Tshuva, so I was secular, and then I became Hasidic, and then I was modern Orthodox, actually.
So you could afford it.
No, I was broke. And, it was really fat. The reason I did that was because I was like, I really believed in the Torah Umada idea. I really wanted to believe in that. And as I, started again to learn about extremism, authoritarianism, and as the straw that broke the camel's back was when a friend of mine was going, actually two friends of mine, the woman was trying to get a divorce and the husband was controlling the divorce. And really it had to do with orthodoxy, in which a man had a lot more control than a woman had. There are loopholes, of course. There are ways of getting around it. But at the end of the day, the system is about the fact that a man has the power over a woman. Of course, there's a lot of examples about that. So my point is, I don't mean to degrade the people's choices. What I do want to share is that I don't think this is a reaction, like this is not just, oh, people were hurt, now we're choosing the opposite. I think that is a common trope that's shared. For me, at least, the reason I talked about authoritarianism, all these things, is because I actually believe that what a lot of us, at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, the reason that I've decided to leave orthodoxy as a whole is because I want my life and I want the choices I make to be as free as possible. This doesn't mean we don't have responsibilities, but what I do believe is that I don't want to be in a society in which women have less power than me. I don't want to be in a society where this level of hierarchical control exists in any form. And again, like I mentioned, I think this is not just about orthodoxy. I think if we look at it more broadly, this is about how we leave that as a whole, for me.
Cool. Yair, we know you're here. You're getting the next question, whatever it is.
Hold on, I do feel I need to chime in on this. It's an important question. I will say, going back to the answer I gave before, growing up, we don't know much about modern Orthodoxy. We know a lot about our bubble. We literally don't know about modern Orthodoxy. Some of us who have like slightly less religious cousins, we would barely interact with them, right? Whether they're modern Orthodox. In my case, I had Chabad cousins. My grandparents were Chabad, but they were like a little bit modern when I was young. And for many, many years, we didn't visit them because of that. So we live in a bubble, so we don't know about modern Orthodoxy. I happen to think, different than Elad, that many people who grow up in the community, if they had known about modern Orthodoxy as an option, they could possibly consider it. There are some other barriers, in addition to not being able to afford it, is that it's also a bit of an exclusive club. You know, we come there without any knowledge of our own history, any knowledge of sports. My kids right now, so we did integrate into a modern Orthodox community, so I know a little bit about it. It's very difficult. My kids now are at sports games. We didn't have any of that growing up. So you come to shul and people are talking about different teams and different games, you don't have a clue. Even if someone invites you to, what's it called, that big football thing. So, you know, you sit there and you're like, okay, yeah, oh, the ball went there. What just happened? Great. You don't understand in how many ways we are completely handicapped. So for many people, they don't even understand that as an option. They leave, they leave. There's no in between. I no longer believe, why would I stop here? So there are a lot of good reasons why people don't choose it, but in my opinion, the main thing is it just doesn't feel accessible to someone who grew up in the Hasidic or Haredi community.
Harris, obviously. That's the T-shirt.
Hi.
Not my political opinions, which I will not share.
Beatrice, in your talk, you said that it is compatible, it is possible to get an education and be Haredi. If that's true, then why is the Haredi community expending so much effort trying to prevent their children from being educated? The question is for the panel.
I don't know if you want to take this, Yair.
I think it's very clear. The reason is they want that it will be difficult for them to live. This is the real reason. If someone can live, you have the choice. If you have nothing to do outside, if you have no education, so the risk that his level of spirituality will decrease is not exist. This is situation. I'm speaking about control, but from the one state from the eyes of fully believe ultra-Orthodox person, he said the most interesting, the most important thing is to keep my children stay ultra-Orthodox. And you spoke about the Holocaust. I went yesterday to Williamsburg to see the situation with all of the ultra-Orthodox, and I see a sign that the name is She'erita Pleita. So the way the ultra-Orthodox community looks themselves today is, we survived the Holocaust. My job is to keep the Hasidut, is to keep the way of ultra-Orthodox alive even after the Holocaust. And because of the Holocaust, we will stay close. So this is the most important thing. If it's said that it's better not to give education, math education or English education or whatever other education, I will do it because it's the most important thing.
She'erita Pleita, or as we say more in this part of the world, She'erita Pleita is the term for Holocaust survivors, the remnant plucked from the fire. Is that the biblical reference, I think? So I think we have a few more questions, but if anyone wants to jump in on that one, I know that this is your big issue, right? Hasidic education. Okay, so we already know what you think.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'll keep it short.
What is your sense of why it is that?
So first of all, in regards to authoritarianism, I've seen in my lifetime where there are some communities that have gotten stricter and with more control. And I think when we talk about the Haredi, the larger Haredi community, there are Haredi groups within the Haredi world that do provide an education where you can get a high school diploma. And I'm not talking about learning the Talmud critically or necessarily reading a novel, right? There are kind of different ways to be able to allow people to learn how to speak the language of their country and get a high school diploma so that they can get a job. Like and again, I say this as someone who advocates for education within the Hasidic community without having to change the entire community. I try to keep that very separate. Is there a way to do that? Yes, there's a way to do that. Does that mean those kids will get the best education? No. But there are spaces within the Haredi community that have done that, and we don't see a higher rate of attrition in those communities. That's my quick answer.
Okay, more questions? Yes.
Obviously, it's not exactly the way that you're describing it, because there are people that still within the Hasidic community that come from Muncie and then work in technology. So not everybody is uneducated. My next question, which I don't understand, is that when I assumed off the derech meant that they left completely. Now I'm understanding, and maybe someone can explain to me, what is the difference if you are not Hasidic, but you still want to be Shomer Shabbat and you still want to be Orthodox? This is something that is confusing to me. Maybe you can explain.
So I think people did make it clear that there are definitely places within Haredi society where you can get enough of an education to work in high tech, right?
But I want to say something about it. There's a difference between Israel and the world in this situation. In Israel, you see much more communities that have no education at all, and it's a board. You see much more ultra-Orthodox that have no jobs at all at their life. So they live in the all their life, men. I mean, in the koilel and get subsidized by the government and also by a donation.
Post-secondary Talmudic.
And you see that in Israel. It's many times in Israel, people say, why the Haredi people here think they can't work? Because you see the Haredi people all over the world go to work and meshalvim and integrate both.
So the question on a definition for what does it mean to leave the Orthodox world, and does that include the possibility of some kind of observance? Does anyone want to take that one on?
Yeah, I live in Pico Robertson.
He lives in a Shtetl, but it's in LA.
Oh, yeah, I live in a shtetl. I live in Pico Robertson in LA, which is the Jewish shtetl there. And a big reason we moved there is because we met with some progressive leaders, progressive religiously, progressive politically, and for us that mattered a lot. And one of the things they did for me was show me the ways, I already believed this, but they showed me the ways in which, I think very often the description of OTD people is very black and white. But the truth is, leaving Orthodoxy, leaving Haredi life it doesn't mean leaving Judaism necessarily. For many people it is, but my wife runs a Hebrew school, I'm speaking, at shuls and everything, I identify as Jewish. And I think that's why, again, what's interesting to me about why it was helpful for me to define authoritarianism as opposed to orthodoxy was because it helped me dissect what were the parts that I felt were wrong, and also what were the parts I felt were beautiful and right, and what I could see, why did I actually join? Because I do think there was a lot of value in that sense. And I think OTD people are also, one of the beauties, I think, of OTD community and the communities I've been in touch with, like Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, it's always, as far as I can tell, always framed as a process. You're at one stage, you're leaving this, and I actually love the Christian idea of like deconstruction, because that implies that you are just breaking apart the parts that you feel are wrong and then reconstructing the life you want to live. And I really think like that combination of understanding it's not black and white and understanding it's a process that goes on throughout your life is really what allowed me to feel much more secure in my Judaism.
Beautiful. We have time for one more question. And yes.
So my question is, do secular Jews and ultra-Orthodox Jews have anything in common? Because, yeah, I think, someone who grew up secular, this is the closest that I've come to being curious about ultra-Orthodox Jews and this process. Also being curious about what I can do to kind of reach a hand. But I think that, secular Jews still see themselves as Jewish, and at the same time, there's such a divide. And we definitely see, I see ultra-Orthodox Jews almost as a cult. You've spoken about authoritarianism within that community, and as an other. So I was just wondering, as Jews who have made that journey and transition, a journey that my grandmother made, how do you see us all as a collective?
I love that question. Anyone have a thought about it? Yeah.
As I began my journey and started entering other Jewish spaces, I was surprised how familiar in some ways that they felt. In some ways they felt so different, but we all had the same Torah. Our prayers were a lot more similar than different. And it really struck me that, yes, we are coming from the same faith and belief tradition for sure. But yes, in terms of the authoritarianism, the cultishness, there's a huge, huge divide. I would say now that the community of people who have left, the Hasidic and Haredi community is growing, you're very likely to encounter people like that walking into your, into your spaces of worship or other community centers, and realizing how hard that is for them, and also how important it is, how they want to be connected in some way, reaching out a hand, and also seeing them as experts in some ways, right? Because we do have expertise in areas that many other Jews wish they had, but they haven't had the exposure to it. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for making the connection. And also, I'll just say this, there's leadership in the community that works really hard, and I think Naftuli showed some of that, to really present a certain image of the community, whether it's through politicians or other leaders. And it's important not to buy into that. There's a very big divide in terms of how the leadership wants to protect the image of the community and what people's experiences are in the community.
I just want to add to that, though, that looking at the demographics, the Haredi community is the fastest growing population possibly in the country, but certainly the fastest growing Jewish demographic. And unfortunately, we know not all Jewish denominations are growing, some are declining. So what's happening is the Haredi community is becoming a larger and larger share of the Jewish population and essentially becoming the face of the Jewish people. In New York, ironically, of all places, you could argue that that's already the case. Politically speaking, the mayor doesn't care as much about what the rabbi of your synagogue feels than he, compared to what the Satmar rabbi does, and that's a very important thing because that shapes policy towards the Jewish people, but even policy in general. The Haredi community has strong political muscle. So my message is, whether you like it or not, it's going to come knocking on your door, and it's not too early to get involved and to try to help those who are seeking to bring some type of reform to this community.
Thank you. So actually, I just want to say something really little. So I just finished a book about Freud in Hebrew and Yiddish, and at the very end of Freud's life, this is like what your question made me think of. The very end of Freud's life, he got a visit from 3 YIVO representatives in London. So shout out to YIVO, including Yitzhak Nachman Steinberg, who was an Orthodox anarchist and a YIVO member. And they came to and had a beautiful conversation with Freud. And as they were leaving, Freud said to them, they were all significantly younger than Freud, who was in his 80s at that point. He said to them, I look at you and I see my father and the people that I come from. So there's this moment of real connection that he had with these Yiddish speakers, which is one of the most moving Freud stories I read when I was doing research. Anyway, so what happens now is that we're going to take a 15-minute break. Please, is there coffee out there maybe or no? So you can run and get Bread's Bakery down the street. There's enough time to run and get a cup of coffee. But please also look at the material in the lobby and schmooze. Talk to someone that doesn't look like you do. So that's part of what we wanted for this conference. So we'll see you all in 15 minutes for the next session.